claiming it tested a new intercontinental ballistic missile for the second time on Friday. Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that it can strike anywhere in the world. This as NATO fears that its forces may not be ready to deal with Russia should a conflict arise. For more on all of this, James Carafano, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and a security and foreign policy analyst. Thank you for being here today.
Good to be with you.
We have a dramatic amount of ground to cover on this. Let's start with the reaction to this poisoning. We're kicking out diplomats. Russia's kicking out diplomats. Canada, NATO allies as well. This is thought to be the biggest expulsion of Russian diplomats since the Cold War. Is this the right reaction? Did the world, the U.S., need to do something in the wake of this poison attack?
Yeah, I actually think the administration hasn't got enough street cred on this. I mean, the United States just didn't kick out a bunch of diplomats. It coordinated its efforts with over 24 other countries, so it essentially became a global response to Russia. This is a major diplomatic initiative, and, you know, coming from a president who is, you know, A, supposed to be soft on Russia, and B, didn't care about diplomacy, this is a really, really powerful signal. You know, kudos to the administration for really ramping it up and doing a lot more than I think people expected.
Yeah. You know, taking things beyond the discussion about what's happening as far as diplomats are concerned, broadly we've seen the grab of Crimea on the part of Russia. Actions, very sneaky actions in Ukraine that are still ongoing, the meddling in elections. So they've done a lot of things that are kind of underlying and sneaky and nefarious, but at the same time, they're also doing things that are very bold and very in the open, as in this most recent missile test, which President Putin there saying this can go anywhere in the world. And how can we forget that video where it shows a missile striking here in the United States as well? I mean, what is the message that President Putin is trying to send?
Well, you know, I think the most important aspect of the story is really the one nobody has really discussed or talked about. You don't put together a new generation of missiles in a week or a month or a year. It's a multi-year program. And if we go back to New START, when the Obama administration cut a deal with the Russians, and they said, look, this demonstrates that the Russians are serious about de-escalating the role of nuclear weapons in the world. We can reduce our reliance on nuclear weapons because the Russians are going to reduce theirs. Clearly, they did not do that. They started a program on a next-generation nuclear missile. So this really shows that the last administration's policy on dealing with the Russian nuclear threat was really off base.
You know, he's also talked about this the missile being more powerful, that it can go farther, that it can go anywhere in the world. What should the world's response be?
Well, first of all, I think if you look at all the things that the Russians have done over the last few years, and we kind of put a mark in the wall on when the new administration came in, you know, they invaded the Ukraine, they invaded Georgia, they really ramped up the operations in Syria. But look where we've been the last couple of months. I mean, the U.S. has armed the Ukrainians, armed the Georgians. We've pushed back on NATO. They attacked U.S. forces in Syria, and we literally pummeled them into the ground. So from a hard power perspective, it's been almost 2 years since Putin's had anything that looks very muscular or impressive. He actually looks like he's on the defensive. And so what we've seen of late of the Russians is a bunch of disinformation, small active measures, and really these kind of propagandistic speeches to make him look powerful and strong. But if you look at action versus action, the U.S. has been much tougher on the Russians than the Russians have been on us.
You know, when we talk about Russia, we have to talk about the tit for tat. Their diplomats, our diplomats, our diplomats, their diplomats. But when we talk about what we're seeing in escalation as far as these missiles are concerned, are we on the cusp of an arms race? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, I don't think so. Look, we're on the cusp of the next evolution of nuclear systems. That was clear. That was going to happen no matter who's in charge of whatever, because technology has gone to the next level. So we're going to move into hypersonics. We are, the Russians are, the Chinese are. This is an inevitable evolution of systems. I think the United States has also demonstrated that missile defense is actually efficacious. We're going to move forward on missile defenses. I actually think the others probably will as well, and they're going to build up systems to challenge missile defenses, but then we're going to build up more powerful missile defenses to meet them. So I actually don't see this as a tremendously destabilizing environment that we're in now, because at the end of the day, you know, nuclear war is still unwinnable and unfightable, and the Chinese and the Russians and the Americans, They all know that.
Yeah, boosting allied readiness, it's been a priority of the administration, and particularly of U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. He has talked and really pushed on NATO to be ready and more ready. Is that sending a message that the U.S. is saying, you guys need to be ready? Do we need to read anything into that?
Well, from the perspective is I think it's really put the Russians back in their place, as they no longer see Europe as an easy target. You know, I would have argued a couple of years ago that Putin thought the next step here is the dismantling of NATO and the breaking of the linkage in the transatlantic community between the United States and Europeans. I don't think he thinks that's a realistic goal anymore.
All right, James Carafano, thank you so much for joining us today and giving your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
President Trump giving a rally-style speech in Ohio just days ago, touting